None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and I don't know, I was thinking the other day about politics and comics, and I was kind of thinking about my little brother, and I had an analogy I wanted to talk about with my good friend Perch from the Comics by Perch podcast. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. So this is my analogy. Politics, as far as comic books, are like onions, and it's not the Shrek analogy where it's layered. Onions are pungent. They're very strong. When my little brother was a kid, he would tell our mother, "I hate onions," and we would explain to him, "Listen, dude, everything you eat has onions in it. You just don't know it." So it enhanced the flavor. It didn't overpower anything. But if you put too many onions and he could see it, then it became repulsive and he would refuse to eat it. He would just, "I'm not eating that." But then if you eat something like, onion rings, you're kind of expecting it to be there. There are exceptions to the rules. But I do think that politics, if you go too far in a comic book or other forms of entertainment, it can absolutely ruin the flavor and the story that you're trying to get across by being too heavy-handed and just overpowering the story. What do you think?
I think that's a good analogy. That's a great analogy. I think politics is first of all, we got this knee-jerk reaction to kind of like onions, to just hate it. When you hear it, we hate it. But the reality, politics are threaded through our lives all over the place in lots of different ways. And politics aren't really the problem. It's what you do with it. Just like a chef who doesn't know what they're doing with that onion can make it terrible for yourself. Or if you consume it raw and too unfiltered, then you're going to hate that too. So I like that analogy. I think that works quite well.
So when you think about, people always like, well, politics were always in comics. I think social commentary has always been in comics, and I think there are hints of politics. Or if you go to something like The Watchmen, which has a lot of politics in it, but the backdrop of the story is politics, or at least a political climate, where they're telling this kind of story of humanity and kind of superheroes gone wrong. So if that's the backbone of the story, then obviously people are going to be expecting more politics to be in there. But I think if you're too heavy-handed with it, or if you lead one way or the other too much, you can still turn your audience off.
Yeah, I think if somebody comes into a comic and it becomes unexpected, even if it's kind of benign, even if it's not bad, like if you're picking up Spider-Man and the cover looks like he's fighting the Stilt Man, but then on page 2 we're getting 5 pages of kind of Aunt May tackling social commentary with the homeless shelter, and there's a politician trying, and if you suddenly wade into that and you don't expect it, it's an unexpected surprise, and it's probably not a good one for you, because that wasn't what you came to the party for. If you're picking up Watchmen, in theory you should expect it. If we do get that prequel to V for Vendetta, you get U for Unrest, then you're going to expect some politics. But I also think we've moved to this place now where, for a lot of people, even if they expect it, even if they know it's coming, they have this knee-jerk angry reaction to it. The I don't want it. And 10, 15 years ago, people would say to themselves, "I don't want that," and kind of move on with their lives. And now, because there's been so much attention to this and just so much, they're no longer satisfied to do that. So it's like, I'm really angry. Why isn't anybody listening to me? Please stop with this. Becomes the response. And it's I think a lot of it is just people, a lot of the stories being created, they insert stuff in where it doesn't particularly fit. And that's the challenge. And then I guess the other piece is there's kind of social and political commentary, like a cartoon like that. You've seen that, the picture of MODOK where you had Trump's face, where it's not really political, but it is, because you're making fun of a political figure, but you're not,
and you're equating him to a giant, floating brain thing. Yeah.
But you're not, it's not a political storyline. It's like a political punchline more. And but I think there's been a lot of that, this idea of like, hey, we need to express ourselves in some art in some way. So let's like shove that in there. People don't want it.
I don't think it's only comics either. I think there's a lot of things that have played into this.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, I know that my parents and the kid I played down the road with, our parents didn't exactly align politically. I was aware of it, but they didn't really talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there was a joke here or there at the local when we have a barbecue at our house or their house. That was pretty much it. Otherwise, we're talking about football, baseball. What are the kids doing? You know, are we doing anything this summer? Stuff like that. And people just kind of generally avoided it for the most part. Just, you know, no reason to argue. But it feels like it's just in your face constantly. You can't get away from it. If I go watch ESPN, I can't get away from politics. That's supposed to be the sports network.
Yeah.
If I go just watch Nickelodeon, the little cartoon network, I'm going to get like Pepsi telling me like how I'm supposed to feel about these big issues that are really complicated. And it's just constantly hammering you. And that's the position that I'm in. I can be triggered very easily and very, very annoyed and stuff that would have never bothered me 5-10 years ago.
For sure. And I think that's a lot of people. And it's not, you know, there's just so much of it. I think that, you know, you like this Pepsi ad that is political in its theme. 15 years ago, that same commercial could have come out and you probably wouldn't have blinked an eye. It wouldn't have been that big a thing, but we're oversaturated now where we're turned on, we're tuned to see it and to be annoyed by it and to constantly be on the watch for it. So, I mean, it's like when you have one commercial, maybe during a 30-minute, 60-minute show that's got kind of a political message, before you kind of shrug, you would ignore or just kind of sail right past you. But when you've got, you know, one of those every ad break or two of those or three of those, now it's enough. And so now even little things are going to trigger you to say, damn it, this again. And like you said, I also think we got this weird thing where people feel like they have to comment on it or they're bad. And this is to me one of the stupidest things that's come about, which is if you're on ESPN, you're a sportscaster and you don't give your opinion on a political social topic, well, you must be terrible. So you have to comment on it.
Or you don't agree with me, and that's why you're not saying it. If that's clear as day, you never mentioned it, so that means that you don't agree with me, so you're bad.
Yeah. So you feel like these people, like it's in the middle of we're talking about the draft, and somebody's like, you know what, I need to get in here. My feeling on statues being removed in the South. It's like nobody cares about that. We're vaguely mentioning the South because there's some of the draft is. You know, some of the players are coming from there, but that's not the door opening to talk about your feelings on Robert E. Lee. Like, why are you doing this right now? But people feel compelled to.
Yeah, I remember it was Doomsday Clock. I think it's issue number 11. And there's a character at the end. He's not a big character. It's just somebody. They've got a red hat on. It says nothing on the bill, but what he's saying is kind of racist. The way he's saying, and someone hits him in the back of the head, I think with a rifle. It knocks him out. And people are like, oh, I can't take it. Everybody's always, bashing Trump supporters. And I'm sitting there like, well, it doesn't say anything on the hat. Can you no longer portray a bad person with a red hat on and it not being, attacking Trump supporters or MAGA?
Mm-hmm.
But I completely understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
Where people are coming from. Even it just becomes so much.
It's hit a saturation point, and a lot of the stuff wasn't done elegantly. I mean, you've had both Joe and I on the channel and Breen talking about comics in the 80s, and there's absolutely political themes there, often handled with nuance. But they're also, it wasn't just kind of randomly peppered into every comic. There'd be a storyline that would go out. It would be, Captain America's dealing with some stuff from the government. Some people are trying to kind of take his shield away and manipulate things, and that's going to be a political story. But to your earlier point, you knew what you're picking up, and you knew you're in on that, and you didn't have 20 other comics at the same time also giving their view of it, and also the story was allowed to breathe. It wasn't just like a one panel joke or a 2-panel joke constantly coming at you. It provided context. Whether you agreed with it or didn't agree with it, it's fine. I mean, at one point, Reagan was turned into a snake monster and other things. I mean, you could not agree with that stuff. You could be on the other side politically, but it's laid out like a story for you to consume or ignore. And when it's constantly like a rifle blast, just constantly shooting at you, it gets to be too much. And that's what we're seeing now. And that's where I remember that panel, the guy's in a red hat, and it's suddenly here we go. We're attacking, Trump. And it's like everything. People are on alert now for everything they can possibly see.
I'm glad you brought up the retrospectives we've been doing. So there's one it won't be up Saturday, be up the Saturday after that. We talked about, I think it's Detective Comics 471 through 476. Excellent. I think it's Steve Englehart.
Right.
And Boss Thorne is in there. And essentially one of the big overarching themes of that story is Batman fighting corruption, or corruption within the city council, like taking the city's, infrastructure or personnel and using them against Batman, even though he's fighting on the side of the people.
Yeah.
And it's clear there is a corrupt politician. I don't know if he was Democrat. I don't know if he was Republican. I don't know if he was independent. It wasn't germane to the story. You just know that he's a corrupt politician. So if you're on one side, you're like, yeah, it's those guys. Or if you're on the other side, you don't. Anybody could read that and enjoy it. And it's not making any statement because it had nothing to do with the story. It's just about corruption.
Yeah. Yeah. And it worked. And today, I think you would read that and you would be, well, two things would happen. Number one, the likelihood that a creator would slip in just some tiny little phrase or word or hey, this
election poster with the color scheme and maybe a little animal on it to let you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, look, this is related to this. So there'd be those kind of in nods to one side or the other or both. And then on the other, the reader is going to be reading this and just looking for any sentence or any statement that reminds them of a speech or somewhere. If it's just that there's going to be that constant dynamic now between both. And there's a lot of really good political stories in comics. There's been some great ones. We've talked about Grunwald before. Love a lot of his work. Several of his stories were political, and then he turned Captain America into like a werewolf at one point too. So, you get a little bit of everything. But there's a lot of good stories in there, and the problem is, they're not being delivered nuanced and with caution. There's too much this desire to make little quick gags rather than actually do the story. And there's a saturation point. I mean, like, look, if put it this way, forget about politics. If every single comic coming out was throwing in K-pop references constantly in every comic, just little
like social media appearances of social media in comics. It's
or that. That's a more. We'll use a more real one. I'm trying to inflict K-pop on your listeners, but yeah, social media references. You get sick of it. You quickly get sick of it. Even if you agree with, even if you like social media, use it, whatever else, you get filled up. Your saturation point is like, I'm tired of this particular storyline. I'm tired of this. Can we move on?
I'm tired of seeing Instagram. I'm tired of seeing Twitter and Facebook as a means of providing exposition in a comic book. Be more creative.
Exactly. And this can happen with characters. I mean, Deadpool was in everything for a while. And what happened is people got tired of Deadpool. There was a sense of like, enough. We got to, bring him back.
Harley Quinn's that way for me right now.
Yeah, Harley Quinn is a great example. This happens all the time with characters. It happens with themes. And what we saw with particularly, about 2014, 2015 through more or less today, politics has been the theme that we got to get it in, and it's that sport thing. If I don't say anything, maybe I'm bad. So I guess I have to give my opinion on the border crisis in this issue of Transformers. It's like, but why?
Exactly. And it's even words now. If I'm reading a comic book and if I see the word privilege anymore, a word that, whatever, you use the word privilege in a story, whatever, it's been used so much and it has such a connotation within today's dialect. I hate the word. It's cringe inducing for me. It's like, don't even use the word anymore. I want to see that. I don't want to see the word woke. There's so many words that were innocuous to me 5-10 years ago that I just can't stand it. When I see it in a comic book, I have to sit it down. Like, oh gosh, again.
And it's too bad. I mean, because it is arguably like the Pepsi commercial you mentioned earlier. If you just either handle these things with more care or space them out, it would be fine. I mean, people would consume this. The comic book audience has been completely fine with plenty of progressive kind of concepts for decades. You had very early on gay characters in the comics. You had racial topics being handled in the comics. A lot of these things in the 70s, 80s, very, very early. You didn't see this kind of backlash. You saw people more or less either accept it or not read it. But the constant proliferation of it means, I mean, a lot of people say I'm tired of politics. In my mind, I think what a lot of people are actually saying or thinking is, I just want something different. I just want some, ironically, I just want some diversity of this content. I need something other than constant this. I think that's maybe they're not saying it, but that's I think what a lot of people are thinking. They're just like, space it out. That's why you see people say, I want manga. Well, manga has plenty of political themes in their books. Absolutely, there's plenty there. However, there's a huge amount of manga, and they tend to space it out more. They tend to keep it where we're in different books. You can read an entire manga series with no political themes in it because they don't feel the need to shove it in everywhere. And with comics, there's a lot more of it than there should be.
Yeah, I'm same way with deconstruction. It's like deconstruction would be great if I saw it once a year, but it's monthly right now. Ugh. It's a tired out trope, and I don't know. It's just something I don't personally enjoy. I want to thank you for coming on here, listening to my little analogy about my brother who hated onions, even though everything he ate had some onions in it. But when you chopped them too big or you put too many in there, it affected the flavor to such a degree he wouldn't eat a bite.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.